Welcome to our Simple Healthy Life podcast, where our goal is to have real, insightful discussions on topics that we find interesting. And I have had this thought rattling around in my brain for quite a while. It's a topic I wanted to talk to you specifically about, so I'm excited to be here. I want to talk about why we don't seem to be proactive, specifically around our mental health. Now, I know that you are a registered dietitian and you spend a lot of time talking to people that have found you, and whether they found you proactively because they reached out or maybe they were sent to you some way.
Sure.
They're essentially being reactive by the time they found you. So what's the reason? Why aren't we proactive?
Yeah. We have a hard time trying to take care of ourselves in a proactive way generally, because the issues never seem so pressing. Even on like from a physical health perspective, the heart attack is something that people often wait for before they actually change their lifestyle, right? But not very many people are thinking, well, that's an issue I could potentially run into in the future if I continue the habits in this same way. Same thing for our mental health, right? What is, for the most part, what is poor mental health? I mean, it's very similar to how our physical health declines. People go through their life with building up these kind of bad mental habits, and then at a certain point I don't know how to deal with the stress. I don't know how to deal with anxiety. I don't know how to deal with new situations. I don't know how to deal with grief or whatever kind of emotion that comes their way. It's not until these things really pile up that the sense of urgency increases, and then people are searching desperately for a solution. So I think it's just hard for our brains to conceptualize in a lot of ways that there are things that we should probably do for our health, our mental health, our career, our relationships, that we should probably do right now so that we don't get to the state of having an urgency, having a heart attack, having a panic attack, having a divorce or whatever it might be. I think it's just hard for people to conceptualize.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that we don't live in a society that values proactivity. We do for some things, though. Now, as I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, like I learned, and I think a lot of people have learned, you brush your teeth every day so you don't lose them, right? So you brush your teeth every day. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're not proactive about that, right? You go to the gym every day so you don't age poorly, or maybe you don't, right? But when it comes to like mental health, it's not you meditate every day so that when challenges come up, you can understand them, or emotional well-being, right? Social and emotional learning, which I think is just an interesting term that we put stigma around, but emotional health. You check in with yourself every day so that you don't have the blow up. I mean, think about like the school system. When do we talk about empathy? When do we talk about positive conflict resolution? Usually in the principal's office, right? Usually that's the guy or girl having the conversation because there's something went wrong, something went askew. We had a fight or an argument, or somebody did something improper. Why not start this concept of being proactive? And I don't know the answer. I'm trying to figure it out. I know it's not the way I was raised. I was raised when you had an emotional issue, you dealt with it. I actually still don't know what that meant, right? But it usually meant I had to go to my room or I was grounded. That's usually what it meant.
Right.
But it wasn't like, all right, these topics that we've talked about, like feel the emotion, learn about it, understand where do you feel it, how's it feel, what's it feel to come up, or you said some really hurtful words there. Where'd they come from, right? Let's take a few moments and address them. It's not, we don't seem to learn how to do that, or we don't seem to it doesn't seem to be valued in our society. How come?
Well, when it comes to mental health, there's certainly a stigma there. I'm not really sure why. Because everyone feels anxiety, everyone feels depression, everyone feels these things that are challenging to us on the inner realm. Yet we don't ever want to talk about it. And so I think it is such an engaging topic because there are things that one can do to improve their mental health, to make sure that they're resistant to, significant emotional distress or panic or whatever it is. It is true that there's likely, certain brains that just operate in a different way or neurodivergent or however you want to phrase it, that some people are maybe just more prone to having more anxiety or mental health struggles. So maybe that's a part of it where we don't necessarily know exactly how to treat these things. Even with like eating disorders, which a topic that I know intimately, there is no concrete way to go about it. Right? They're all kind of guesses in the right direction. They're all trial and error, and everyone is a little different. So there isn't one concrete way to say, here's how we get better. And I think that's true with anxiety. I think that's true with depression. I think that's true with most things on the mental plane, is that we don't really know because it's a subjective experience. And so maybe because there's a lack of certainty around those things, there's no real good measurement there. Maybe that's why we're less inclined to talk about it.
Yeah, great answer. What if it's as simple as that? There's no way to measure, and it's so, your word intimate is great. It's so deeply personal that we put up these walls to say, if you're not strong enough to deal with your own emotions, then you're weak. If you're not strong enough to deal with your own mental health, then there's something wrong with you. And I think that's what's happened in our society. And I was fortunate enough to talk to one of my favorite people, my client Pam, and she's 60, she just turned 60. And she said what she's seen is actually that it is getting better. From her generation, that was absolute truth. You were thought of as weak. If you weren't strong enough to deal with your own internal workings for whatever reason, whatever your upbringing was, whatever that stuff was, then you were seen as weak. And when you decided that you've had enough is enough, and you lash out, well then that's bad on you. You shouldn't have done that. But no proactivity to say, oh my God, I'm gonna lash out. Oh my God, I feel like, hey, it's Monday and I'm already stressed. By Friday, I'm gonna need to drink that whole bottle of wine by Friday because I just can't take it anymore, right? No actionable plan for how to fix it. Just wait till you blow up. Everybody says that's bad on you. On Saturday morning, you apologize to everybody. I'm sorry that happened. Still don't have any actionable plan, and then move on. And I think that I do see us progressing in the right direction as a society. I do see more coping mechanisms being offered, but even these coping mechanisms are not necessarily looked at as a proactive way.
No.
Right? You mentioned on a previous podcast, one of the things that you like to do when you're not feeling your best is to either paddleboard or play some music, because you're wise enough to be proactive about it, right? But how many of our listeners don't ever look at that? They wait until they absolutely have to, and then they go, I just can't take it anymore. I'm gonna call in sick to work. I just can't take it anymore. I need to go to my room and just sit by myself, or I have to drink that bottle of wine, or I have to do these things. And they end up on this yo-yo effect, and realizing now that they don't actually have what it takes to get out of that yo-yo effect. They've been living that yo-yo effect for so long. I feel like there's something there. There's a piece missing that I'd like to be able to talk to people about openly, not in the form of therapy, right? Not this the stigma around, I'm already gone so far that I need to talk to a licensed professional mental health therapist. What about if it was something where we made it normalized, the idea of going and talking with your friends, your friend group, about some challenges that we have, that we all might have,
Right.
without judgment? Like, is
Right.
that possible to do? Or is it too much stigma to say, I can't do that, I can't come and talk, I can't do it?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I see the direction changing slowly, right? Like, at least as far as my world's concerned, I do see a lot more people engaging in maybe more positive mental health activities. But yeah, I almost see it going in one complete opposite direction in the same sense too, is that while we're bringing more attention to that, there's people who say, well, maybe we're leaning into the emotional side too strongly. And you and I had this conversation the other day where I really recognize that there are, when we talk about mental health, sometimes we almost get too in depth with it. We almost get too identified with the emotion. We almost get too identified with anxiety, right? How many times does someone say to you, I'm an anxious person, right? Rather than, I'm a person, I feel anxiety sometimes, right? And so I think that can be very detrimental. And you've spoken before on labels and how that can be challenging. So I think that's a slippery slope. We want people to talk about mental health, but we don't necessarily want to be identification with being mentally unwell, because the identification with being mentally unwell facilitates mental unwellness.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, as you were talking, I kind of imagined we don't have any sayings about mental health proactivity even as kids. Like, you always hear, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Instilling into young kids, hey, you should probably eat something okay, something that has some nutrition, because then that will keep away poor health, right? But you don't hear, a journal a day will keep the psychiatrist away.
Right.
A meditation a day will keep the therapist at bay. You don't hear that kind of stuff. But even in the discussion, yeah, I think it would be great to have people open up to friends and family and other supports. But even the concept of therapy is still stigmatized, right? In the sense that, like, people feel that they have to have some big, massive problem to even then go talk about it. I think people really struggle with vulnerability, which maybe is why, I might have trouble saying, MJ, I'm having a really hard time at home. Here's why. Do you have any thoughts? Like, that's a big step. Even for someone, for us being pretty close, that would be a big step to take for a lot of people. But it's a lot easier to close that gap with someone who's really trained in that kind of stuff, or who might be a good soundboard. And so you don't often ever hear about people just, I'm taking up therapy. I just started because the space is nice. I'll say that I started the other day. I resumed the other day, and most of the time I've done therapy one time in the past. Mostly just because, right? Just because it's nice to have that space. I actually value the space. I value the time of, like, expressing and then getting some sort of feedback and then reiterating on the thought loops. But I maybe heard that once or twice in my life where someone was like, yeah, I take the space just because it's a healthful activity. It's a proactive activity, right? Doesn't ever occur to people. And to your own point, it even doesn't occur to people, especially men, to talk about emotions openly. And so why do you think that men in particular have a problem with that?
Well, I think men have been, if you go all the way back, we were in charge. We had all the power. We were expected to know the way forward, and we would take care of the community, the women, the children, in some regard. And anytime that you feel expected to know the way forward, you feel reluctance to ask for help.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, how many times have you seen someone driving in a car? Well, not now because we have GPS, but before, like, no, I know the way. I'm definitely not stopping and asking for help, right? That dates me, by the way. It definitely tells you how old I am. But that was the way, right? No, I'll figure it out. I know the way, right? When the answer was just stop, roll down the window, ask the local, is it a left or a right? So I think that reluctance to show vulnerability, especially in front of your peer group, in front of the people that you're supporting, made you feel like you're losing control, right? And giving up control is something we really, every one of us is reluctant to do. So then you take it a little step further and you go, okay, well, we're supposed to show what control looks like. We're supposed to show what stoicism looks like. We're supposed to be this model of a man. And as soon as you say, I don't really know how to do that, or, oh my God, I'm dealing with this, are you dealing with this feeling in your chest, right? Like, that makes you feel vulnerable. And we'll go, well, I'm going to be stronger than this feeling in my chest. I'm going to be stronger than my heart racing out of my body. And eventually it'll go away. And the truth is, it usually does. But why did it come there in the first place?
Right.
And how can we proactively identify that, work with it? What are the things that we can do to not bring it forward all the time? And one of the reasons I think we don't do it is because we're not. Well, number one, to your point, you can't measure it. Hey, if I do this every day, I won't feel that anxiety. Well, I don't know how do I know that's the reason I don't feel it, right? Or if I do this every day, I'll only feel it once in a while. Well, I'm still going to feel it once in a while, so why bother, right? It's like your analogy was spot on, right? The apple a day, like brush your teeth every day, apple a day. I only got one cavity. Well, how do you know you wouldn't have got 6 if you didn't do those things, right? What are we doing about that? What I want to bring the conversation towards what it looks like to scientifically prove to yourself that meditation is an effective way to keep the therapist at bay. I want people to say, when they're done leaving this podcast, I'm not only going to embody somebody who is proactive about my nutritional health, embody someone who's proactive about my longevity, embody someone who's proactive about my physical health, but I want to embody someone that's proactive about my mental health. And what can we do? What can we do that takes a short amount of time every day to do that, right?
Well, one of the things that I always like to share is that health is in the habits, right? And so you need to break things down on a smaller individual level and tackle those small individual tasks to then even think about having longer term health. It's interesting. Almost everyone I talk to about meditation has the same answer. You know exactly what the answer is. That's too hard for me. I can't do that. It's not for me. It's challenging. It was uncomfortable, right? So many people have difficulty focusing even for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds on an object or on their breath or whatever it might be, because that's in essence what meditation is. It's the art of directing focus, simply put. How can you ever imagine to focus over the long term of building a business or growing your career or developing a relationship or developing a skill? How can you imagine focusing over the course of years or the course of your life if you can't focus for 30 seconds, right? And so I think it makes a lot of sense. And when you think about it that way, because you understand, well, I have to do things in chunks to be able to even consider doing them in large amounts, right? How do you eat healthfully if you can't put together a healthful snack? It's not a thing, right? If you can't even conceptualize a healthful snack, you can't conceptualize a healthful diet. How can you expect to have a good relationship with movement and exercise if you can't get out there and put together 10 minutes of some movement or some exercise. So I think we often have difficulty with the small stuff, and we try to then think, well, I'm going to skip all the small stuff. I'm going to skip the things that play a big role into mental health and expect myself to be well. And if something goes awry, I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it until I get put in a hospital or
Right.
something. Right?
Yeah, until something really bad
Yeah.
happens. It's, well, as you were talking about, this small time frame, I think that every single person listening to this podcast right now is aware that our attention span is being shortened constantly. Every generation, whether for people that used to sit and read for an hour, we're down to now a TikTok video is most of them you don't even watch the whole thing. It's 11 seconds. And I was recently interacting with some of the younger kids that I get to interact with. They don't even listen to the whole songs anymore. It's like it's only 2.5 minutes. And we're constantly being bombarded over and over and over again with people that are constantly attempting to take our attention. And we're never being given the opportunity to learn how to your point, keep our focus. So maybe we can be proactive in a way where we say to ourselves, 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes a day, I'm going to try this one thing that I know will work, proven will work, science proved it worked, years proved it worked, but I may not feel it. I may not feel it tomorrow. I may not feel it the next day. I may not feel it 6 months from now, but I'm going to eat my apple every day. I'm going to brush my teeth every day. I'm going to take a shower every day. I'm going to meditate every day. I'm going to focus on my breath for 5 minutes every day. Maybe that's the key. Maybe it's helping people understand that it really is that powerful.
Right. People just don't give enough credit to those things in the mental realm at all. I don't think, and I'm grateful to have the discussions because I think it is so important. If there's one thing that cultivates a good physical health, there's one thing that goes into good physical health. It's a good mood. It's good mental health, right? How can you expect to take care of yourself if you don't feel well, right? The one thing that derails people's progress on the health front a lot of the time is the fact that they just don't feel well, that they get stressed, that they get overwhelmed, that they get anxious, they get depressed, right? Those are the things that then cause you to say, well, screw it. But those things that we run into, we can get better at weathering the storm, essentially. And so, yeah, the act of meditating on a somewhat regular basis, just because it's probably good for you. If attention is a currency, then we should probably work on being better at spending that currency, right? It's very hard for us to navigate through a life in which everything is trying to steal your attention. And so we're being like pickpocketed every time we pick up the phone. There's 100 million notifications, stuff that you don't even like, where did this one come from, right? Because you don't even know what's coming up, and they're literally stealing your attention from you. And part of that is obviously there's a lot of money in attention, right? And that's a big part of it. But attention is also a superpower, or focus is a superpower. If you can focus on one thing for X amount of time, there's no better ability. There's nothing better for someone to cultivate than focus, at least in my opinion. If you sit down and you work on something for an hour straight with no distractions, that's a rarity, at least as of right now. Maybe not back in the day, but it certainly is right now. And so the people who can cultivate that kind of focus with meditation or even like writing or whatever it might be, that is a superpower.
How often do you think that our kids are engaged in an activity for one solid hour that doesn't include any type of distraction?
Probably never. Probably 0% of the time. A solid hour of dedicated focus, I don't think it's probably ever happened. Probably even for a lot of people our age.
Yeah.
right? And that was in the era of not a lot of relevant distractions at the very least. But yeah, focus is a skill. And then you have and it's a little controversial, but you have ADHD becoming a very popular diagnosis, even a very popular self-diagnosis, which has obviously is very testable, very provable, and all that kind of stuff. But then the self-diagnosis from a lot of people, I have ADHD. What they mean is, I really have a hard time focusing, and so I don't think I can get better at that. That's just who I am. That's just how I operate. I'm very fixed in that mindset, so I have ADHD. And that's not to say, again, that it's actually very interesting. They can test ADHD and find this in very young kids, the pattern. So there is neurodivergence on that front, but there is, I don't know. I talk to so many people who self-proclaim ADHD. I mean, it happens every day, and then I'm like, oh, okay, where did you get diagnosed? Well, I didn't. Okay. Yeah. So you're acquiring this label, then this mental health label that really isn't serving to you.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And it's actually interesting. I'm just looking at the camera this time. I'm not qualified to tell you what ADHD is or is not. However, it is my belief that it's easier for people to label you or you to accept the label of ADHD than it is to work on internal ways to fix it. And if you're going to go to a doctor and say, I have these challenges, that doctor is likely to say to you, here's a diagnosis that I know many other people with these challenges have, and here's some prescription drugs to help you with that. Mm. It's very unlikely that they're going to say, why don't you proactively do these things for 6 months and then come back to me and say, it didn't work. For a couple reasons. And don't think for a second it's the doctor's fault. It's essentially we're partners in this. I want an answer, Doc. Yeah. I want an answer today. Right. I'm dealing with something that's challenging to me, and I would like you to give me the answer that I'm looking for. And for the doctor's perspective, I've got 11 minutes with you. Yeah. And that answer is the one that you want. It's the one that I'm giving you. And I know that other people have this problem, so it's likely that we're all in this together. Why can't we say, no, there's got to be, if I went to the doctor and said my neck hurt, they're going to make me go to physical therapy for 6 weeks before they'll say, all right, it's not cost effective for us, but we're going to take a look inside and we'll do the MRI, we'll do all those things. But if I go to you with a mental health challenge, they're going to say, instead of taking the 6 weeks on a program of being in nature, grounding, meditation, art therapy, these things that we know to be true, it's going to say, here's the answer for you.
Yeah, take this, man.
Take this thing. Yeah. And that's why I don't believe, that's one of the primary reasons I believe that we're not being proactive. Yeah. Because the answer is, we have a pill for that. We have alcohol for that. We have drugs for that. Just try it, see if it worked for you. And of course you're going to feel a certain way. Mm-hmm. Instead of, you know what, we actually have 1,000-year-old coping mechanisms for that. But you're not going to feel it day one. Oh, and by the way, you really need someone to teach you the ins and outs of it. You really need to sit down with somebody and say, okay, what happened during that 5-minute period where we sat in silence? Well, my brain took off because I have ADHD. No, your brain took off because that's the way it's wired, and that's the way you've trained it over the last X amount of years. Right. Let's do it again. 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 And then, okay, now here we are. the other challenge I feel we have is, how do you know? How do I know that my brain's different than yours? How do I know that I have a harder time or being focused than you do? Right? When I'm 11 and I'm sitting in my desk and I'm fidgety and I look over and you're not fidgety, I assume that I have ADHD and that you don't, or that I'm not normal and that you are.
Yeah.
But we also know that that could just be the day.
Right. How would anyone know what a mental health struggle truly looks like, real mental health struggle, if you don't get exposure to that ever? We never see terrible, terrible depression around us because it's kind of like pushed off to the side. Those people aren't out. They're on, I mean, they are, but they're not expressing the symptoms of depression, the outward, kind of, there isn't a lot of outward symptoms of that. How would you know what debilitating anxiety looks like unless you've either experienced something like that or know what it looks like, right? Or how would you know what ADHD looks like if you don't actually get education on that, right? And so, to the point made earlier, I think if people spend time talking with people who know about these things, then they probably would be less likely to self-diagnose. But when it comes to a mental health struggle, the self-diagnosis is pretty much definitive. If you decide that you have the anxiety or you have ADHD, you're stuck on that, and you'll find someone to back that up. You'll go to a psychiatrist and they'll back that up because you shared symptoms akin to what it might look like for ADHD. It's very common that some people will come to me and be like, "Hey, I have an eating disorder," and then I talk with them and I'm like, you really. And I don't have the right to say anything about it. I don't have the right to diagnose those kinds of things because it is a mental health diagnosis, and I'm incapable of doing that. But a lot of these people who present saying, "Hey, I have an eating disorder," do you? Or do you just have a normal challenge, right? You're challenged by the logistics of food and life is hard sometimes. But oftentimes there are people who fall into that category of self-diagnosis, and it's just, it's not, it's wrong in some way to label yourself if you don't have the knowledge, right? And so, yeah, I think we do have to be more proactive and engage in more of these mental health coping strategies or however you want to call it. And I always share is that coping strategies are developed, not found. So in a lot of ways, if you are feeling stressed on a Friday night, you had a tough day at work, or you had some tough clients, and you're like, I really just need a drink tonight. And you go and you have a drink at the bar, 1 or 2 drinks, like, it's not problematic, right? It's fine. You're allowed to cope with alcohol or food or whatever it is. But the problem starts to occur when your brain and you only learn that as a coping strategy. So then every time you're feeling stressed, it becomes, let me go for the alcohol. Let me go for the drugs, right? Because I feel that right away and that must help. And it seems like other people are doing that too. So then slowly but surely, your brain's starting to pick up, when I feel stressed, I drink. Or when I feel overwhelmed, I eat. And we know these are not helpful, but they help in the moment, in that very moment. Of course, drinking then, helps relax, all the kind of emotional turbulence that might be happening in the moment. But we don't build up nice, helpful coping strategies from the rip, from proactive, being proactive. We don't meditate just to meditate. We don't build that coping strategy up. We don't journal just to journal. We don't practice breathing just to breathe. Most people who probably see you for breathing are in a crisis, right? Same thing with me. People will send me an email and reach out when they're in crisis. Very rarely do I have someone, reach out and say, I just want to make sure I'm doing this the right way. Actually, this morning I had someone do that. It was like weird. It's like, wow, you do pretty well. Like, good job. Like, keep doing what you're doing. And then she was like, great, awesome. But that's such a rarity. So to your own point, we aren't proactive, but We really should be. We should do these things, do these coping strategies, start building them up when we're feeling well so that we can actually recognize when they feel well. I'll tell you, when I meditate, just because it does feel good. When I meditate when I'm stressed, it doesn't seem to do much because I'm stressed. I have that turmoil going on, right? But people need to get used to finding at least one strategy: breathing, hiking, nature, journaling, writing, whatever it is, and then start building that up so that when the times come, hey, I'm feeling kind of stressed, I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed, at least you have some coping strategy that was developed.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. And the one thing that I would add to that, though, is when it comes to the breath work, and I'm grateful that I get to teach breath work, I've never had a client not feel differently after.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas meditation, of course, I don't know what's happening in their head. They could say that I was meditating and really thinking about whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually physically change the way your body's breathing, you do physically change the way your body reacts.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we could offer that for people to, as a coping mechanism, to try and just get a result. Your body will tell you, just get a result. Any result is good.
Yeah.
When it's easy and you're feeling good, go do your breath work, go do 10 minutes of breath work and get a result. That result will be it'll be your parasympathetic nervous system will come into play and you'll feel better. But maybe just get a result. It's like brushing your teeth every day for 6 months and then going to the dentist and not having a cavity. That's a result,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just do the breath work for 10 minutes, get a result. Know that you feel better.
Yeah.
Go for a walk in the nature, get a result. Know that you feel better. Just try one step, one, and then let's just keep that train going. Feeling proactive about your mental health.
Yeah.
Get a sweat. Go to the gym. Get a sweat. Just one day, then another, and then another, and then another, and see what that does. See how you can actively be proactive in your own mental health.
Yeah. It's great advice. It's interesting. I really love the breath style or the breathing style. I don't know what it's called. They call it the double inhale. I don't know if there's a scientific name, but it's where you do a big deep breath in and then another one on top of that. And then you slowly let it all out. And you do a couple rounds of that, stretching the lungs, filling the capacity. Lungs are releasing some of this calming hormone. This really seems to help. And it's interesting because it's very natural too. You look at like a child sobbing and they do that. They do that like very like exaggerated breath. And there is something very natural about breathing, and we forget that we can take control of that and use some of the systems that the body has given us. Because they know that breathing releases these like calming hormones. The way in which you breathe, the capacity to which you breathe does relax your body.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been trying to do a lot lately, and it's been remove the stigma around the word breath.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you start talking about breathing, some semblance of our population is going to say, I know about this. This is, you're a yogi,
Mm-hmm.
or you're a woohoo, you're a spiritual person.
Yeah.
What I've been asking my clients specifically to do is start to just go back to your anatomy training from middle school and use your respiratory system differently, which we can all do. And yes, that is the way that the breath comes in and the breath goes out, but using that respiratory system differently will get a different response. And the mind and the body are so intimately connected that something like 90% of what's going on with our mind and body at all times we're not aware of. And it's below the conscious level. Like we don't have to tell ourselves to breathe. We don't have to tell our heart to pump. We don't have to tell our skin to heal or regenerate. These are all things that are happening anyways. That when you can actively, consciously change the way your respiratory system is working, your mind will have an effect. And we know, to your point, that double inhale, that expands the lungs, that pulls your entire respiratory system into play. For most of us, they've actually proven that we only use about 70% of our respiratory system
Mm.
all day.
Wow.
So that's 30% of our system that's just sitting, not being used. And I mean, let's face it, we're built a certain way. We're built for a certain reason to use all of it. So when you can start to use it and pull that into play, there's no doubt that your mind will be different. And when I say get a result, I mean literally try until you can get a result. Just try that double inhale, try that box breathing, try something every day until you get a result. And then build on it and build on it and build on it and build on it. And what you'll find, and what, you can read any book you want, you can, you take me for a perfect example, is when you practice it and you're proactive about it, it'll come back to help you when times get tough.
Mm.
And when you're about to lose your mind or about to freak out or you're in need of positive conflict resolution, you can say, no, I practice this. And it just comes. It just becomes a more natural way of being. And just the same way you practice putting together a healthy snack, and then it becomes a more natural way of being. You practice going to the gym, it becomes more natural who you are. These are things that we got to figure out a way to implement into our society. We got to figure out a way to bring to our school systems. We got to figure out a way to implement into the family. And the last thing I think I'll say on the topic is, it's okay if the generation before you didn't teach you this stuff.
Mm.
It's okay if it wasn't the way that you learned when you were in school. Be the change you want to see. Be that person that can bring these things to light. Be the person that will do it just for you, because the people around you will notice. And then you're making a positive impact on your own mental health. You're making a positive impact on the people around you. And maybe this is the generation that does change it. Maybe it is the generation that goes from you're fine, everything's fine, you're weak if you need it, to no, let's practice it together and get after it, and we'll eat healthy, we'll go to the gym, we'll work our body, and we'll be proactive about our mental health. Maybe that's time. Maybe it is time.
Mm. Yeah. No, and I think it's great to have people such as yourself you're actively trying to bring this material into schools. And I don't think you'll take offense to it, but you're not the most educated person in the world on breathing. Not to say that you're not very capable of teaching it, but you're making a difference just because of your background, because you do know a lot about this. You are very skilled in this. You're not the CEO of breathing, but you're very good at it, and you're bringing it out there. And so the world needs more of that. People who aren't afraid to say, hey, I don't know everything, but I do know a lot about this subject, and I know it can help you. And so that's awesome. So kudos to you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed talking to you about being proactive. I hope that people take away, just try. Try and don't expect to feel the same way you do when you have a glass of wine. Right? Don't expect it, because that's a short-term gain. That's treating a symptom. That's not treating the challenge that you really have. Try in the same way you try to eat an apple a day to keep the doctor away, or what was the other one you used? It was really good. Or go to the gym in order to keep yourself, from aging, or keep yourself aging gracefully. Right? Try in that same regard, because it does work. And in fact, I would even argue that it's been around longer. More people have been successful with it over the course of time. And you're not weak for needing it. You're not weak for using it. And you're certainly not weak for reaching out and asking for help.
Right. Certainly on the for men, right, recognizing that you have emotions is much different than expressing that emotion without your cognizance. And so for a man to sit there and say, well, yeah, I'm feeling kind of sad right now, but then still be stoic in action, I think a lot of men resonate with that. They want that. They want to be stoic. They want to be the person who can take charge and lead and be the protector or whatever it is. But it's very difficult to do those things consistently and very well if you don't also recognize what's happening on the inside. And so I don't think either of us are saying, hey, you have to be completely defined by your sadness and you got to mope around and express that outwardly. No, I'm not a super outwardly expressive person, but I can recognize when I'm feeling a particular way, and I can do the best I can to then, cope with that and move on. And we've talked about in the past how a lot of men are violent crime offenders because they bottle up their emotions, and then that externalizes in behavior, violence, etc. That's not strength to bottle that up. That's weakness. You don't have control over your actions. That's as clear as a weakness as it can be. And so by recognizing this, practicing your insights, practicing meditation, journaling, breathing, you actually get more capable of being the man that you want to be.
Yeah.
The stoic man that you want to be, or the nurturing woman that you want to be. So
Yeah, well
super
said.
helpful. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening today. Hope that you are proactive about your mental health. You can find us on pretty much anywhere there's podcasts. Reach out to us, listen, and give us any feedback that you like. We'll always take it. Till next time.